how do you start developing in object-oriented programming? Well, the first step would be to use my classes. In the project example coming with this course, you have several classes that you can use directly in your project, and some of them are fairly simple. You can basically put them in your project and start using them in a few minutes. So by example, with one of my class, you're going to be able to add a log to your code very easily. Just a few minutes, nothing to it, really, just to familiarize yourself with the using of objects. You also can replace basically your project initialization code, the one that you're currently using, by the different object that I'm using in the basic framework. You have the CL project class for the project, the CLDB for the database management, CL log to add your log to your code, CL param to manage any type of parameter that you may need in your application. So really, you start by looking at the project that's coming, and we're going to have a look ourselves very soon now, and you use them in your own project. You're going to see that it's going to be very simple to do and just give you a good start. Then you're going to modify them. By example, you're going to adapt CLDB to your data access because you are using MS SQL and MS SQL is not in the class, by example. And it's going to be very simple changes. Just look calmly at what is done and do the same thing, and you're going to end up programming object in no time. Then the next step after that is going to create a first class, a very simple class. The best way to do that is to start by taking one of your project, the one you want, one in which you are using quite a few global procedure, and you're going to take part of that collection of procedure and make it a class instead. It will not do anything specific object, but it will give you the habit of just doing it as a class. The step after that is to find somewhere in your project where you're using a structure and some code working with the structure, and to create a class instead, to replace it. Then the next step will be to create a more advanced class. The more advanced class is going to start really using the object stuff to do some interesting thing in your program. And by example, we are going to have a look at the CL form class that is coming with my example project. And it will allow you to manage forms of any file. And you will see here that I'm talking about forms, which is not a W language concept. In W language, you either have Windows, that's in WinDev, or in WinDev Mobile, or you have pages in WebDev. And here I'm talking about forms voluntarily, because this class is done in order for you to be able to use it both on the web and in WinDev, by example. So this class is supposed to abstract the fact that you're working with Windows or with pages. That's what a class is supposed to do. And this form, if you work on it and if you improve it, is going to be the beginning of your own RAD. Instead of using the RAD that is inside the tool, you're going to be able to basically create empty windows, just put a few buttons on them with your code calling your class, and you're done. Your forms are working. So you can very quickly manage all your basic windows this way without using the built-in RAD. And the advantage of that is that first, it will be much more simple for you, because the RAD that is coming with WinDev tries to manage every case in its country, and because of that the code itself in it can be quite complex. The second advantage is that it's your code and you can do whatever you want or you need, which means that you don't have to rely on a way of doing things that you don't like or doesn't fit really the need of your customers. So this example today is going to be really the beginning of your own RAD, the beginning of your own bricks of code that are going to be inside each and every one of your projects. We are now going to talk about the end result. The project that is coming with this course is not a theoretical thing. It's an example of what you can do as a basis for your RAD, as we said earlier. So before we go into the details of each class and what it does and how it does it, we're going to have a look at the end result and what the program itself does. Then we'll see how it's done. So as you can see, it's a very simple small window with a login. When you create your when you run it for the first time in your machine, it's going to automatically create a record with a login admin and a password admin. So you can just use that as login. Once you're in the program, very simple again, in the file you have the quit option. In the tools is everything that we're going to have a look at. And we're going to start with the settings wizard, because normally when you start your program for the first time, this wizard is going to pop up automatically before anything else. You can after that rerun it from there, of course, but we're going to do as if it was the first time I was running this program, which clearly is not the case. So this is the setting wizard. The first thing it asks is in which language you want to work. We're going to say English because, well, I think that if we start working French, I'm going to have some problems. Then the next step is how do you work with your data? If you're working alone on your computer, that's one thing, and if you choose that, basically you're done, there's nothing in to select. Now if you're working and you want to share your data with other people on other computer, then you choose that option, and you're then asked if you want to do a simple share via basically what is a shared directory with Hyperfile Classic, or if you want to use a Hyperfile SQL server that of course you need to have installed beforehand. Depending on what you ask, you're going to have the corresponding questions, of course. In our case, and you can see that I can go back and forth in my choices and change things, it's not a problem. I'm going to say that I'm working alone on my computer only, which means that I will be working in Hyperfile Classic in a local directory. So if I'm doing that, I'm done. And after that, each time I'm starting the program, it will work in that specific state. When you want to have a look at what are the current status, well, I included my basic programs, an information page in which I have, and that's information coming from inside the classes, so that's something that we're going to have a look at. It's one of the results that my classes are returning. We're going to see that we have all the information saying, okay, the data directory is there, and the INA file in which the information about data directory is stored is there. That is information coming from the CL project class. From the CL data class, I can find out that the current database is Hyperfile Classic, that the data directory is there. As you can see, it's the same one as before, which is quite a good thing, I would say. And that the INA file, because clearly the data CL data class need the INA file to know where to look, is the same also. Also, we know that the current user login is admin. We're going to have a look further on how it's done in each class. But this allows you very easily to know what you're working on and where, and solves sometimes problem because you think that you're working in a directory and in fact your data is somewhere else. It's happened a lot. After that, you have the user management. We have a user login, so we need a user management, but there is a trick. The user management is the subject of another course, and what you have here is the end result as a component included in this project. You do not have the source of the component. The source of the component and how it's done, how to create a component like that, is subject of another course that you will be able to find on my website. So here you have just what is the result of the component, and as you can see, it's a fully functioning user management with password and all that. This one is the one that has been automatically created to allow initial loading. It reminds you that you should change the password, otherwise everybody in this course will know that the administrator has a password that is admin. You clearly do not want that. Okay, so that's the user management, and we'll look less at that part because there's no source in this project for that, just a component. And the part that we're going to look at the most is the parameters management. So in this application, we just have these two files, users and parameters. But clearly, the code that is used here is a class and could be used on any different file for the basic form management. The magic in here, the part that is interesting, is the dynamic objects. That's the most extreme part that we're going to look at. And it allows us to do things like this. As you can see, I'm opening several parameter records at the same time. No problem. I'm not going to open all of them. Then I'm going to create a new one. And create a new one, and I'm going to have a look at the list of all the windows that are open. As you can see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 in edit mode, 2 in new mode. This is the ID of the record that is currently managed in each window. All that is managed very easily by the class itself. As you can see, I've opened several different parameters. Now if I try to open this one, I just have the window here coming in the forefront of the session. Now it's that one. Now it's this one. The same record is not opened a second time. Instead, the focus is given to the window of the record that is already open. So all this management is done very simply, as you can see. You're going to see by the code that is inside the class. And we're going to have a look at all that in details now. Let's have a look at what we have inside the project. Well, we have a few windows. We have the home windows, the main one. We have the info windows to display information, the init wizard with several planes. We have the parameter form, parameter table, and the two standard dialog box and message box from WinDev. As you can see, we do not have any user window, and that's because the user functionality is inside a component that is part of another course, so you just have the component inside. Then we also have all these classes: CLDB, CLEmail, CLError, CLForm, CLGUID, CLLog, CLParam, CLProject. We're going to quickly go first through the I'm going to call them simple basic classes, where we're already going to see a lot about objects, and then we'll finish with the CL form and how it works. So, first thing first, let's say that you've never done any object. You're going to create a class. To create a class, as usual, you do new, code, and class. You type whatever name. I personally prefix my classes with CL, so that's part of my charter. And this is what you get when you start a class. You have 3 different area of code, and that's extremely important. Please pay attention here. The first part here, just like in a window, is the declaration. That's where you're going to declare all the variables that are inside the class, the one that are called members. That's where also you will be able to declare constant when you want to use constant inside your class. So that's in the declaration, nothing really strange here. But these two are something that you probably have never seen if you haven't done any object before. It's the constructor and the destructor. This is really something that is extremely basic in object. When you create an object, and when you create an object is not maybe not when you think about it. When you create an object, this code is automatically run. It's just like the initialization code inside a window, something like that. When you delete an object, this code is automatically run, the destructor. It's just like the code that is running automatically when you close a window. It's the same principle. But the difference is, when are these things done? So if we're talking about a static object, it is when you are declaring the object. You remember when you do O test is CL test, then it's a static object, and on that line the constructor is going to be run. When there is no explicit call to the destructor, it's when the object is going to be deleted. So if it's a static object that you declare when going in the init code of a window, by example, it means that the object is local to the window and will be automatically deleted when the window is closed. So in the closing code of the window you have absolutely nothing, and yet when the window is closed, the destructor of your OTest object is going to be called automatically. And that is a trick that I'm using, and I talked to you about it in the CLlog class. Now, when we are working on a dynamic object, then the constructor and the destructor are called explicitly. If we look somewhere where we are doing some dynamic objects, in the param table, when we are doing new, we are opening a window. In that window, in the init code, we are declaring that this object is CLForm dynamic. And then we are doing this, equal new CLForm. This, of course, could be done on the next line or anywhere else. Sorry. So this is the declaration of the object, but the object is not created there because you said that it is dynamic. It means do not create me now, just create this name. And then whenever you want, whenever you need, you do this where you're saying, okay, the name now is equal a new object of the CLForm class, and that's when the object itself is created. That's when the constructor of the object is run. Now look at what we are doing when we're closing the window. When we're closing the window, we are explicitly saying delete GWDO form, because it is a dynamic object, and if we are not explicitly saying when we delete it, then it stays there active. The problem if you declare it here and not deleting it is that it is active, but the for GWDO form name is local to the window. So you now have an object that is completely global to the whole project, but the name of its object is known only inside the window. And that's the kind of problem that you may have with objects. You have an object, but its name is local in something. The object is not. The name is. And that's a notion that is sometimes difficult to understand at the beginning. So let's go back to our test class. What else do you need to know about the constructor and the destructor? Well, there is one very, very important thing to realize, is that is about the syntax of this procedure. Normally, all procedure everywhere do work the same way. You can give them parameters, and if you put a result value in it, you will get the value inside the calling code. Not so for a constructor. Look at the syntax. If we are in a regular syntax for a static object, we just have this GWDO form is CL form, and that will call the constructor. As you can see, there is no syntax to get a result. You're not doing my result equal GW form is CL form. Doesn't work. Same thing for a dynamic object. When you're doing this, what you're doing is basically putting inside this name the address of this object. And again, there is no room for a result, which is why I generally prefer not to put any code inside the constructor or the destructor, except when I really need to. And instead of putting code inside the constructor, I add a procedure that I call init my class, initDB, init project, init whatever. And init is going to do the real initialization code, get all the parameters, and send a result. So that is going to replace really the importance of the constructor. The constructor is going to be called anyway, but after that I will manually call the initialization code and test the result of the initialization, which is something you cannot do inside the constructor. And now we're going to just delete this test class and look at the real one.